Smoov and curly on video.
Hi, Michael.
Hi, Charles.
I have a question for you.
I have a sheet in my picture. Sheet happens. All right, go ahead.
My question is, did you watch the episode, whatever it is we're supposed to watch, 6 of WestWorld?
Sure.
Because I was thrown all out of sorts by that episode for a whole bunch of reasons, some of which one could connect to computing and computer science, and some which are just purely about narrative. The first
Oh,
thing I want to point out is Dolores wasn't in it, except, representations of her work.
we've seen a lot of episodes where we start off with Dolores waking up. This one we focused on Maeve waking up, and it was an episode very much about her waking up.
Exactly. So I'm curious what you thought of the episode and all the massive set of reveals.
So on all the episodes I've watched, I've been taking notes so that I have the details in front of me when we're talking about it in case I need to refer to them. And I wrote yikes and yikes for the very first time in this summary.
Is that because of the implications for computer science or something else? I would
Oh
love to
no,
know.
it was more the dramatic aspect of it. Just like, oh no, these people are about to come into serious conflict.
Yeah, you can see a lot of that coming. You can also see some consequences of their programming language choices and some consequences of their UI for adapting people choices. And you can see some consequences for the way they decided to construct personality choices. So we did get to see some interesting debugging thing. And we got to see a kind of Gödel's incompleteness theorem, halting problem, self-reflection blow up in the middle of the episode, which I really enjoyed.
I thought that would be the main computer science thing for us to talk about because I think she experienced a Stack Overflow.
So the way Stack Overflows tend to work. So the first thing you need to know for those of you who don't do this for a living is that there's this data structure called the stack. The way the stack works is you push things on the stack and they go one on top of one another. And then you pop things off the stack. So that means it's a LIFO queue, last in, first out. So the last thing you put on the stack is the first thing that you can take off.
And I'll just point out that the word stack is much easier for people to understand than LIFO queue.
I don't know, one that seems much more intuitive to me. Anyway, kind of like a stack of dishes. And then of course you take the dish off the top because you can't take it off the bottom of the whole thing falling out. So you have the stack. Why do we care about stacks? We care about it for a bunch of reasons, but specifically when it comes to programming, every time you call a function or a method or a procedure, or however it is you think about it, you typically put state on the stack. And so the stack represents a complete trace of all of the function calls you made. So I call this function, and then it calls this function, which calls this function, this function, this function, this function, this function. And then when this function is done, it goes off the stack, and we know who called it because it's there on the top of the stack. We continue running it, pop it off the stack, and so on. So stack overflows happen in this case where things just keep popping one on top of the other until eventually you run out of room and everything crashes.
What we saw was Maeve looking at a display that was reflecting her current psychological state.
And the specific word she was saying.
It was a lot of things, but it included the specific word she was saying in almost a kind of auto-completion representation, kind of a, here are the words that have been said so far, and here's the next word that's about to be said, and the choices about what could be said at that point, and we see some of the past choices. And so she's looking at that, and as she's looking at that, it's giving her ideas about what she's thinking, but of course that becomes reflected in the display, which she then has to process before she even gets to think about what she had been thinking about resolving. And so she's just getting more and more deep into her own head. And then she literally froze, which, was a choice that the writers made. It is what you see with computers. Computers will point, like everything just like grinds to a stop. There's just no place to go from here. And she kind of embodied that.
But, what's important there is, you can think about it programmatically or procedurally, right? Which is, if you take the stacking thing, what happened was she is seeing herself reflected in front of her. And so there's a kind of recursion. It's like watching an infinite set of mirrors.
Yeah, so that's what I was thinking too.
You keep seeing yourself going on forever. And this is a Stack Overflow, right? It just kept seeing, she was thinking about what she was seeing what she was thinking, but then of course she had to think about what she was seeing, which is what she was thinking, which meant she had to see what she was thinking of, right? So that goes. But another way of thinking about it is, and I like that, both the mirror analogy and the Stack Overflow analogy, but another way of thinking about it is just in sort of pure mathematics, right? Which is you can reflect upon yourself and what you're doing. And the ability to reflect on yourself and what you're doing, that is being a representation that can represent itself, creates the halting problem, right? It creates this, levels of infinity. It creates Gödel's incompleteness theorem, that there are things that are true that cannot be proven. And the Gödel's incompleteness theorem in particular sort of leverages the fact that any system that is complicated enough that it can represent itself cannot represent itself.
Well, there'd be things that it can't represent.
Yes, about itself, even though it's representing itself. Or rather, there are things you can't prove. And it's the self-reflection part that matters there. And that's kind of really cool here. And it was a nice kind of visual representation of what that would look like as your memory sees your memory, but then the memory's in the memory. And then there's just nowhere for you to go but to break.
So can this happen to people? I certainly think that if you could stare at your own brain functioning, you could get yourself into a really weird state. But I feel like it wouldn't come all the way to the point of becoming catatonic.
Well, I think there's a reason. Well, first off, maybe that is what happens to people, but they're catatonic, so we don't know. But I think what humans have is a kind of breaker that once you get more than 5 or 6 levels, probably 5 plus or minus 2 levels deep, you just stop. You just like, look, this is, I can't hold it in memory. So our Stack Overflow is not infinite recursion. It's more like we only have we have an array of size 5 plus or minus 2, and after that we just
plus
stop.
or minus 2,
right? And that's it. And I think that's true. You see this in like game theory, right? When you try to teach game theory, and you can just watch people break when they're like, "Well, I know what he's going to do," but wait, he knows that I know what he's going to do, but I know that he knows that I know what he's going. But then he knows that I know, and you just like. Then at some point, you're just like, I can't think about this anymore. I'm just gonna like, I don't know, punch him in the face and just see what happens. And that's where you go. But this was a complete breakdown. But I did like the visualization of, as she was speaking, the words were there and you could kind of see the light version of the stack and you see little errors popping up. And she saw the error and then she froze. Great.
I froze the error on the screen because I thought it would be interesting to check what it was. It was something like host is executing illegal instruction.
Oh, that's interesting. I like that.
Which, could be like a seg fault, which again could be a Stack Overflow. So it's consistent.
It's scribbling in memory where you're not supposed
to. And the humans who were with her at the time were like, oh God, what have we done? Oh no, this is terrible. And they kind of got her to reboot.
Isn't this like a fundamental weakness though?
Possibly, yeah.
Anyway, can we talk about the UI and the programming language here? So we saw a lot of that. We saw a lot of that in episode 2, the kind of the programming again and the analysis. Tell me what's going on. Analysis. Are you lying to me? Yes. We learned a bit about the maybe where the voices are coming from, and we're finally getting the corporate intrigue stuff to kind of make sense. The way that the machines work, right, is they have properties, and I forget how many, something like 14. I can't remember what the number was of things. Are you empathic? By the way, I don't know how you say, well, you're empathic at a level of 9 and somehow that makes you more empathic. I have no idea how that's supposed to work, but they have all of these different levels. And it's a little weird to me that the thing that represents being intelligent was stuck at 12 because they don't want them to be too smart. And if you don't want them to be too smart, then why would it even be possible for you to put in a value of greater than 12? Like, oh, I want you to turn my intelligence all the way up. Why it shouldn't even be possible to do that. Never mind a reaction to it. Galaxy brain. I mean, none of that made any sense. But she, just why would that even be possible? Why would you do that? Oh, and of course, just before, in a kind of another Chekhov gun kind of way, they just casually mentioned, oh, but you have much more processing power than humans do. You could be so much smarter than us. Something no one has said in the previous 5 episodes, nor up to this moment. I'm just going to mention it now because in about 15 or 20 minutes, it's going to matter because we're going to turn you up to, well, not 11 because you're already at 12, but we're going to turn you to 18. So anyway, I just found the whole interface a little crazy, right? Because if that's the mechanism by which you actually make things happen, then it's easy to make a mistake.
Mm.
Also, by the way, I don't know why, well, these people were scared. They didn't think to themselves, well, maybe rather than cranking up her intelligence, we should shove it down.
Oh, they could have shut her down right then and there.
They could have made her a 6 instead of a 12. There's a lot of little just casual reveals here. Oh, it turns out that they've been having voices broadcast to them all this time.
Yeah, that's what made the episode to me feel so impactful, is that so many little pieces are coming together, right? And is it like the coming of Arnold? Is that what we're about to see?
Well, that's the implication. Here's the thing that I thought was really interesting from a kind of game mechanic sort of way. So the man in black, he's still trapped in some sense by the physics of the game to have to do certain things, and that's what he's doing, which is how games are designed. So there's these there's a whole literature on this about player types. Like there are different people who play games for different reasons and in different ways. And one of them, I forget what they're called, but I think of them as kind of chaotic neutral. Sometimes chaotic evil, but often just chaotic new. Like they just want to break the game, like, or they want to understand what's going on. It's not that's all it is. But even if you're trying to break the game, you still have to play the game to break it. And there are lots of people.
I can certainly see this playing out where he ends up being a kind of hero. I mean, he's obviously a demented hero, but I think that there's so many other forces at play here of people who may actually want to be doing harm, that that he may be, you know, a source of conservatism, right? To kind of preserving the game for what it is, because he actually wants to play it all the way through. Maeve's ability to manipulate was pretty amazing, because she did it. She had like 4 or 5 different techniques at her disposal that she just moved very, very rapidly through to get what she wanted.
Yeah, she's definitely, pardon the pun, the dark version of Dolores. In fact, this is really interesting, right? Because Dolores is trying to seek her objective within the game mechanic in the same way the man in black is. Maeve is stepping outside the game to get to her objectives.
And she got herself killed in WestWorld so that she could come back to the operating room, so that she could continue her conversation with the people there. The wheel that we see with the little spokes at different heights, that is the interface that you were describing before, that that could very well be a standard personality test, right? Or the way of displaying the results of a personality test.
Oh, it is. I've done those things before as a part of, you know, executive training thingies. I don't know, that I guess that's a weakness, and they of course have access to the interface, and it's just too easy. This is like, you know, getting rid of stick shifts and making everything on automatic. You make it easier for people who can't drive to drive, as it were. And now you've made it possible for people who kind of don't know what they're doing to make massive changes. And the only thing that stopped it, I guess, was a convention. So is Arnold alive? Is that what's happening here? Or that's a red herring? Which is it?
The fact that all the other characters think it's Arnold now makes me think it's not Arnold.
Computer science observation. Because Arnold's constructed the hosts so that, and because they continued in this way, that basically voice commands are how you get them to do things. Broadcasting voices in their heads is a massive security hole. Although not all the hosts have receivers, so it's only the old ones. So it's only the old ones that don't, you know, they didn't get the security patch. I think I understood that correctly. A lot of terrible programming choices here.
I guess I'm wondering what the alternative is.
Python is the alternative.
No, that's ridiculous. Like, as soon as you connect it to the outside world, there's a danger that the outside world is going to have some ability to exert control.
And not for nothing, but usually it's a Stack Overflow problem.
So this person has somehow gotten, you know, root, right? Has gotten the ability to issue commands that would otherwise be blocked. So there is some levels of security. It's just that somehow they've been subverted.
Yeah, but that's less secure. I mean, it's security, but it, you know, permissions is a different kind of security from, you know, don't get networked in the world and have programs injected to you from the outside. I really like this episode as a piece of art. And I think on the theme of, you know, are there any interesting kind of implications for people who want to build intelligent things, the kind of AI, machine learning, computer sciencey part of it? You know, it was all interfaces and all representation, but also the kind of behavior-based set a few parameters, and then let the rest of it fill itself out, we're beginning to see not just the imagined fictional limitations of that, but kind of the dangers that come from doing that. Although again, I just don't see why you make it even possible to set a value equal to 18. Although again, why doesn't someone just go in there and crank her down to 3? Problem solved.